hello, everybody, and happy Tuesday to you. I'm your host, Jessica Dugas, and you are watching My Way, conversations with entrepreneurs doing business outside the box. I'm so excited to have you here today because I have a guest who we were just talking before the show. And I say this on every show, I have no idea where time goes. I truly don't. But our guest tonight was on the Breakthrough Show all the way back in season before. That was pre-World Craziness, if you're keeping track over here, okay? She's a Psychology Today preferred hypnotherapist. She's a marriage, family, business coach, a Psych K practitioner, a minister, and so all. Are we surprised that she's multi-passionate, multi-talented? No, we are not, because that is what we seem to do here on the show. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to my good friend, Haley Hallock. Haley is in the building.
Oh,
hello,
my gosh.
friend.
Hi. Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me again. It's
Absolutely.
so cool to see the production side of things on the other side. Like there's so many, I'm like jamming in music. I'm like, Jessica always has the best taste in music.
I appreciate that. And it's a different, I love having you on today because I was in a very different place back when you were originally on the show as well, production wise, how everything runs behind the scenes. And so I feel like this is going to be a nice little full circle moment here.
Oh my gosh. Seriously. I was like, I don't remember all this cool stuff happening.
There wasn't then.
Okay, well, great work, darling. You're doing fantastically. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, look at all this. And then I'm like, I gotta be ready. Wait. And then I'm like, oh no, there's more cool stuff happening.
Yes, it's all, we have to have the dancing behind the screen because I think, as you and I have talked about, the last few years have really, just been crazy for all of us as a collective, even if personally, maybe we didn't have bad things happen. I think just globally, it's a different energy now. It's a different thing. So I try to make it a point to, at minimum, we're going to dance coming into the show. Is what we're gonna do.
I love that. I think that the world needs that right now. I think you're absolutely right. And like we were just talking, this is the first time I've done anything video wise since like pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
Just the energy of the world is different and people are different. And I always just try to be like very conscientious of that. But yeah, it was pre-reset, Yeah. So it's good to be back. And of course to be back with you, this is the best way to come back.
Yeah, I love it. I'm so excited to have you here. And for anybody that, what maybe was living under a rock in 2019, I would love for you to tell everybody a little bit about yourself, where you're joining us from in the world, and how you got to have so many titles, maybe.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And that's another thing. I was like hearing you like read it all off. I was like, oh gosh, that seems a little excessive.
It's literally mine though too. So
a student to the core. My name's Haley Hallock. I am a Psychology Today preferred therapist. So that's within the realm of from the realm of like hypnotherapy. So otherwise I do just regular coaching, and that could be a landscape of literally anything. It can be, I've done a lot in family. I've done a lot in marriage. I've done a lot in just individual coaching, business coaching, like I guess anything that has to do with life. I'm coaching it. So nothing's off the limits for me. I always wanted to, probably because I get bored, hence all the titles, that I don't want to just keep doing the one thing over and over and over again. So it's always just kind of like nice to have, clientele that has different issues and, different. So I'm constantly flipping, from one thing to the next, hour to hour throughout my day. Otherwise, I think I would probably be asleep behind the wheel.
Yeah, I would see. I think that's probably the same. We're going to get all into the psychology, I guess, today, because
I love it.
But I think that could be partly why I do what I do as well with different shows and different guests, because if I don't have that, that
Stimulation.
things changing up and all, like, I would just die. I would be so
I
bored.
agree with you. Yeah, me too. I'm like, okay, I need a new problem to solve here. I need a new area of my brain to start like igniting so that I can kind of like, I don't know. Yeah, I can't do the monotony, you
Yeah,
know?
me either. Me either. And Brittany said no such thing as excessive here. That's
Oh,
not what that really isn't what we do here. Honestly, I think this show in particular, we do seem to attract the people who, even if in the moment they're not doing all the things, they've done all the things at one point or another. So it's literally like a
yeah.
whole list of
Well,
stuff.
that's really cool. I'm excited to be among the multifaceted, I guess, that you're interviewing on a regular basis. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. You fit right in. I will say that.
Fantastic.
So obviously this show is sort of formed around entrepreneurs, so we'll get into that a little bit, but I think that there's a lot, honestly, that we can do personal development wise, spiritual development wise, and also relationship development wise that has an impact on the work that we do as well. Do you see that in your work, Haley, where people have all of these different things that they're working on personally, spiritually, relationship wise, but it's impacting their business?
Yeah, so I always say you're everywhere you go. So
Hmm.
if you have tendencies in, I don't know, perfectionism, we'll just go there since I'm familiarized with it. So personally, it's going to be everywhere. It's going to be in your relationships. It's going to be in your profession. It's going to be in your business. It's going to be in your kids. It's going to be everywhere. So absolutely. And then, so when you look at your clientele in that way too, then you can kind of look at it from that framework. If you are everywhere you go, it's probably touching every area. So what's the safest area for us to touch first? And then people will work through. So say it's your relationships, like I could let go of my perfectionism in my relationship and let my partner be who they are. Or I could let go of myself in that regard and stop trying to overperform or over deliver or whatever. So then we'll touch that. And then it's almost like this beautiful evolution that happens. It's like, okay, that was the safest place to do it. Now let's look at business. Now let's look at your children. Now let's look at, and so it's kind of one of those things where absolutely, I mean, we're human beings. We have very specific pillars in life that affect us. And so, yeah, we're going to absolutely touch all of those across the board. And I think that's what ends up happening for me as a professional is people will come in with one thing and then we'll see that it actually spreads across the board. And so then we touch on all of those things. So whereas it could be, somebody wanting to spend short term with me, it ends up being this long term, which I had to get accustomed to too, because I was like, I'm so solution oriented. I'm like, okay, so you should be good. See you later. And they're like, wait, I just want to come talk. I'm like, oh, okay. So yeah, you kind of see it in all of those areas.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can tell you too that you have, and I can speak for this because I've had a few sessions with Haley, and I really feel like you create such a safe environment for your client that why would they not want to jump down the rabbit hole every week with you and continue that process even if they're done? Right? So it works
Absolutely.
out really well. But I wanted to ask you too, because you talk about touching on different things, but I think I could easily go into a session and be like, okay, this is where I'm comfortable. This is what I want to touch on. And I could also, because I know how I am, I could leave that session and be like, okay, I'm good now. But in actuality, I haven't touched on those places where maybe I needed to. And I bring this up because I was talking actually to Brittany this morning about how, with my morning show, I love my morning show. I'm a morning person. I want to bring all the joy to people in the morning, but I also recognize that in doing a morning show 5 days a week, it gives me a great opportunity to hop out of bed, get right on my morning show, and not have to do a damn thing about me. I realized that just this morning.
You know how I feel about that. So I know you're like, I am confessing in front of everyone. You
It's
can't get
happening.
mad at me right now.
Let's just get it out of the way 12 minutes in, okay?
You're like, just so you know, I have not been doing my morning practice. I'm like, okay. Well, here's the thing. I think that comes in, that can be a personality typology, but it can also be or contingent of a personality typology, but then can also be the way that we're groomed. It can very much come from our childhood when we're in the presence of like codependency and enabling and those types of things. We learn how to be of servitude. Then we oftentimes manifest, like, remember how I said we are everywhere we go. So then we manifest that in our relationships. We manifest that in the things that we're interested in. I find, things like religions are very other centered and they're about like servitude. So I was primed to be in a church, and I know you and I are very similar in that way, where it's just, where can I show up most? But the reality is, and I was actually just discussing this and posting on this today, of course, because that's just the way that God works. But if we don't fill our own cup, like, we're of no use. So oftentimes when I see that in a person, that which I mirror, trying to, just let me put everybody else first. I have to work. I have to make sure I'm on. It's avoidance, essentially, from nurturing the self. And so where I'll start is almost a manipulative component. That person has been doing that for so long, right? I was engineered as a child to be the servant to my parents in whatever regard. I manifested that in my relationships. I did it in my social groups, like being a part of church, right? So then you get yourself in a situation where it's like, this is so deeply ingrained in this human being that the only way for me to subvert that type of behavior is to manipulate you and make it about other people. So I'll say, well, Jessica, you know what? I'm just not going to get much out of this. If you don't get up in the morning and do your, the interview is not going to be what we want it to be if you don't get up and you make sure that you put on your oxygen mask first. And then you'll go, oh, if it's about another person, then I'll start. And then once you realize the feedback loop of really nurturing the self and really spending time to showing up for you, and all those little pieces of Jessica or Haley that have been neglected and that have a voice, you can't spend enough time in that space. I mean, I truly and honestly resisted for a very long time, specifically to journaling.
Right.
Knowing all of the schooling and all of the why this works from a neurological perspective and why this works out of habits and behavioral modification and those types of things. Yeah, knowing it all, I'm like, I'm not going to do it. Now I'm like, if I could stay there all day. I could stay there with myself all day long. And that's a really hard thing for extroverts, to do. So especially those that are conditioned towards that kind of like codependency and enabling component.
Yeah. I'm laughing at the comments right now because
what's happening? I can't see them.
Like there's not much else to say. And I need to manipulate myself. In other words, I feel so called out.
Yes. Well, okay. So I find that those of us in this realm, right? So the people that come to serve, the people that come to heal, the people that come to do the work that we do, and one expression, whether it's doing a broadcast, or whether it's what I'm doing, or whether it's some kind of spiritual coaching or ministry or whatever it is, we're wired that way. Right. We're wired for other people. We're highly social creatures, and so if I don't make it about you serving other people, we're going to gain no ground. The reality is it's like a groove in a record. Like, that needle's going to find it and it's going to keep playing that same song over and over again. So I have to kind of make a little exit off that, highway to let me just make sure I take care of everybody else before me.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I was thinking about is to kind of to throw in entrepreneurship a little bit. There's so many people that I've heard recently, and I say recently over the last couple of years, that talk about this separation that we're supposed to have between ourselves and our work. And kind of going back to what you said before about how you are, what did you say? You are everywhere you are. Is that how did you
Yeah,
say
you
that?
are everywhere you go, right? So
Right.
like you're going to show up in every space of that, right?
Right.
Every area of your life.
Right. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, if I am and have always been a super emotional person, then I'm going to automatically be emotional about my work because that is the human that I am.
Yep.
But so I was thinking to myself as I was contemplating this morning about how Jessica's good at avoiding because I've made a morning show for myself. So I was
I
thinking
love it. I mean, look at that. Look at the extra brain power that took, the commitment that took, like creating and making and then bringing the guest on. That is the level that you will go to towards another person versus towards the self. So you have all the energy for it. You have all the room for it, the creativity for it, all of those things. So maybe it's that you do and you're great and you're on and you do your show first and then maybe you just take an hour for Jessica afterwards.
Well, that's what my thinking was this. So as I, down the rabbit hole with this today, I was like, okay, so what if the morning show, if I could make myself think that this is part of my morning routine, because the morning show brings me so much joy, because it is something I'm really passionate about, because on the days when I haven't wanted to get out of the bed, the days that it is really tough, I'm like, okay, my own show has gotten me out of bed, that
Mm-hmm.
maybe I could consider this part of my work part of my morning routine.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. Part of my morning routine encompasses me spending time on my yoga mat for me. But I mean, as much as I'd like to give myself, credit for being really bright or really intuitive, the answer is I'm really just praying. I'm sitting there going like, okay, what does so and so need? And what does this person need? And what message do I have? So I make it about my work. I also think that there's something very definitive there.
Mm,
We are entrepreneurs that are soul based and purpose driven. So
mm,
that's a little bit different. It's not
right.
like going in and checking into a job for the man in some corporation that you could give two about, like that's not what we're doing. We're doing what we're called to do on this planet. So that's
Mm,
a little bit different. To divide you from that purpose and that expression, that is you. So it's a little bit harder for us entrepreneurs that are more soul based and we're more, this is why God put me here kind of sensation. It's harder for us to separate, but you can. But
yeah.
if it is something that motivates you and fills you up, absolutely make it a part of it. That can be a part of your. That's why when so those are fundamentals.
Mm,
As you know, when I bring clientele in, it's, you're working on your internal monologue and we're working on reframing because we can't get anywhere unless we reframe that subconscious negative thinking. Then
right.
in addition to that, having that morning practice, and that in many ways is behavioral. So where it's a holistic version, it's kind of like the clinician's version of DBT, the mindfulness component, and reframing, and then CBT. So that's kind of what it is, the journaling and then the internal monologue. That's basically, it's like a replica but a holistic version of it.
Mhm.
So because I don't do the clinicianhood side of things, which I prefer, right? So that being said, you doing those things, I put an infrastructure in, as you'll recall, of
Yeah.
what it should kind of look like.
Mhm.
But you can't tell somebody how to pray. You can't tell somebody how to show. How would I know exactly what you need without like sitting on my yoga mat going like, okay, what does Jessica need? If you just let me know, that would be great. Without me knowing that, I don't know what's going to motivate you, what's going to inspire you, what's going to get that energy up inside of you, your optimism, get all those, fun neurochemicals firing in your brain and getting that feedback loop. So if it is a part, of your first show, then do it. Just
I
don't
just
forget
needed,
you.
yeah, I just needed a permission slip. That's what I needed was a permission. And you're so good at that, because I think sometimes that's even what it's about is even with this show, talking to entrepreneurs who are hearing all of the chatter outside of them. You can't do business that way. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that. You have to do this. You have to do that. And getting that to quiet down and go within, and just that permission piece of giving yourself permission to do something that maybe not everybody else is doing, or to, God forbid, listen to yourself. It's
So
tough.
and that's what that cultivation process is. My philosophy around what I do is to work myself out of work with that person.
Hmm.
Right? I want to be so effective in what I'm doing that it causes the individual to no longer need me. Maybe they I have lots of clients, amazing clients I've had for decades at this point, that come, and it's every week, and sometimes there's things to talk about and sometimes there's not. And sometimes it's just, jamming back and forth on ideas or whatever else. But you have to be able to customize, I guess, as an
Hmm.
individual. And I don't know if I ever said this to you, but we can say any cuss word in my office. We just can't say should. And so
Mhm.
everybody's going to have their protocol of their program and how you should be doing things. I don't try to do that with people. I have foundational pieces. I have science and research. I have my education, but everybody is different.
Right.
We'll do psychometrics. We'll look at your personality profile. We'll look at Myers-Briggs. We'll look at the Big Five. We'll look at even astrology if you want. We'll look at religious components, things that make you you, and then I take that information and I feed back that information in a customized form.
Right.
I think a lot of people go, this is my infrastructure, this is my program, and this is how we're going to do things. And I think that is why some people work themselves out of, I guess I wouldn't say they work their clientele out of their programs.
Mm.
It's just like a one-off type of deal because
Yeah.
it's not customized. And that's something I've always had a little bit of I have a push pull, right? That because the businesswoman in me goes, you know what? You talk to more faces, you're out there more. You just, you talk, you do a program, you do a launch, and you're the teacher. It's like, yeah, but I really love the one-on-one because I
Yeah.
really get to know the minutia of Jessica or the next person. And I
Mhm.
want them to feel like I am doing everything that I'm doing solely for you
Right.
and taking all of your framework into consideration and giving you permission to be who you are,
Mhm.
but have these extra tools in your tool belt,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, I think the one-on-one thing, and it's so funny. It's not funny because we already discussed this is how God works. Okay, so the other day I saw somebody posting about, in the entrepreneur world, one of the things that's rampant is talking about scaling your business, growing, 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 scaling your business. And we know that if we are one human being, right, eventually we run out of time.
Yeah. And you top
Eventually
out a
we
little.
run out of time. So when we're doing things that are on that one-on-one basis, I'm seeing it just discouraged so often lately because of that pressure to scale and grow and do more and do more and more money coming in, etc. And so I think that I'm glad that you brought up really leaning into the one-on-one work and enjoying that, and that's okay if
Yeah.
that's what somebody wants to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I have again towards the philosophy of you'll find people will narrow their demographic
Mm.
um, in the sense of, well, I'm a divorce coach, that's what I do, or I'm solely a coach in this space or a minister in this space or, whatever it is. They narrow that like for themselves demographic wise. So similarly with launches and scaling, why can't I do both?
Right.
Why are we limited to one? Like, why can't I cut out half of my week that is devoted to my one-on-one clients, and then the other half of my week I teach a course and I teach, hundreds of people. Like,
Right.
why? Again, I just feel like that's like limiting, or
Right.
my theories around things being gray and equilibrium and balance, why stitched head and heart is called stitched head and heart. We have like our logic and our love. Let's use all our weaponry. So I have a hard time when I see people pushing that thought process. Now,
Right.
is it more exhausting? And are you making essentially less money because you're doing one-on-ones unless you raise your hourly rate? Sure. But do
Right.
I find joy in it? Just like your morning show? Heck
Yeah.
yeah, I do. And it brings life into me, and it gives me purpose, and this is what I'm here for. So you can do both, I guess, is my thought process.
Yeah. I think so too. And I've never, ever since I got into the entrepreneur space, I get wildly uncomfortable when we start talking about niching. Because I feel like I should be able to share what I know, whether that it or and teach and do what I love, even if it doesn't fit into some kind of box of what I do. And so even when I give myself a title, which changes often because of this, um, because I feel like that's what I have to do, but I never feel completely comfortable with it. Is there a happy medium to be had? Like, is there good sound logic between niching and titles and all of these very limiting things, or can we just say, I'm a human being, hire me?
I'm a human and I'm pretty proficient in some things. I've done life pretty well, and so hire me. I love that, and I think that that's a great approach. I think that it's important, obviously, that you're branding yourself to in some way, I guess. But then look at that. Like, I think a brand, when you're working within a purpose business, a purposeful business, or a soul-led business, or the reason God put you here, when you are branding yourself. You are you, right? Like, I'm not gonna sit back and make sure all of my posts are, a specific color so that people know that that's, Haley Hallock who does those things, or she's, am I great with, kiddos? Yeah. Am I great with couples? Yeah. Am I great with, individuals? Yeah. Am I great at helping people build their business? Yeah. I'm great at all of those things. Like, why do I have to be in the box? Now, I guess you just speak to your demographic, know your audience, right? So if you're talking to somebody who is like, oh, I'm really looking for, somebody to help me with my marriage. Well, I've done that in the past, and this is what my experience in that regard. I mean, for social media purposes, I guess you can choose the larger nuggets. But
Right.
even then, like, you reading all of the things that you read about me in the beginning, all my titles, I was like, I forgot I did half of that stuff, like, because I'm just me, right? I'm just Haley, and I'm just doing a job of helping human beings be as happy as they possibly can and live the most full life that they can.
Right.
I've kind of let go of that idea as an entrepreneur that I have to, there's all these tricks to the trade. Like, and maybe that's because I'm like super seasoned and I'm just like over like that whole idea. But I feel like I've been that way since the beginning, because in helping people build their own businesses. So I've helped several women specifically basically do what I do, just give them all the intel that I have and how you get on, into this position to do this thing. Like, even some of my collegiate professors were like, wait a second, how do I do this? And I'm like, you've got a life. Like, you did things already, like you got all these titles and stamps. And they're like, yeah, but I want to do something I feel passionate about. Show me what. So in that and giving all of that information over, I always say and discourage, don't push yourself into this niche because that is it for you, right? So that is who you are. Or then you have to go and fully rebrand.
Right.
And I'm too lazy for that. So I'm just going to write about whatever God tells me to write about in the morning. And you people have to listen or mute me, you know? I don't know. And that's my brand, you know?
I am literally feeling the desire to start every show like that. Like literally, you have to listen to me in this show or you can just not.
Or you cannot, right? And this gets to be that choice, you know? I think there was great independence, you know, via the grand reset that has happened, that you really did start to discern what is valuable to me and what is excess. What relationship do I desire? What things do I want to speak to? It brought us back to our core, I think, which is really beautiful. You know, it's been a weird 3 years and it just keeps getting weirder. So like, I kind of feel like it's possible that like there was a reset button, and in that we've learned a lot about ourselves. And I think that, many hands make light work. It doesn't matter what you're doing or which tool you're using. Just help us out. You know, I mean, I think humanity is struggling in such an extreme way in so many different arenas and could not foresee what has happened in the last, 3 years. And then there's all this censorship and canceling and people just going further and further and further into isolation. And from a neurological and biological perspective, there goes all of your cortisol. There goes all your stress hormones. Everything's coming up to a hilt. And you wonder why people are so reactive with one another. Like, I want people to just feel inspired to go help where they can. And if that means that you don't have a niche, oh, well.
Yeah. I 100%. I'm trying to give I have a little bell. So my little bell that I bring up.
Oh my gosh, let me see it. Let me see it again. Of course it does. Okay. Oh my God, I love you.
This little bell, we had a longtime viewer of the show. She's been watching since back when my shows first started, like 5 years ago. She always watches on the replay. So shout out to Sylvia. And I was on somebody else's morning show where Dr. Lauren Harris has a bell and he calls it his bell of purpose. So every time somebody says something, insightful or wildly funny or something that he wants you to remember, he rings this bell.
Oh, nice.
And so every time I've been on his show, I have found myself on my own shows, like reaching for a bell. I'm like, oh, like I'm on some kind of freaking game show.
It's very like Pavlovian, like,
like I'm just, and so Sylvia saw me talking about this and she actually sent me this.
That bell. Is the cutest thing in the whole, and of course it has a beautiful smiley face. I love it.
It does. I almost, it's smiling at me. So I almost don't want to hit it, but
yeah.
I've been trying. Listen, my whole point of this is that I've been trying to not ring it literally every 5 seconds in the last 30 minutes. Okay. So I'm trying to not go over Haley. We're going to take a quick break and we're going to come right back because I want to get into the specifics of what Haley does and how she helps people. And we'll be right back after this. So don't go anywhere.
Breakthroughs are about more than you might think. They're about discovering who you are, digging deep, reaching to the core of your soul. They're about healing yourself, understanding your beliefs, creating a ripple effect. And it's not just those initial moments that matter. It's about using them to bring more joy into our own lives and the lives of others. It's about having fun, letting loose, enjoying every moment life has to offer. It's about finding a safe space. It's about creating connection. Join us each and every day for exclusive programming, special events, and a community to call home, where we invite you to explore, change the way you look at and live your life, and go beyond the breakthrough. So we ask you, are you ready? We'll see you online at thebreakthroughshow.com.
Welcome back to My Way, conversations with entrepreneurs doing business outside the box. I'm your host, Jessica Dugas, and I'm here with the fabulous Haley Hallock, that is the woman of all things. That's what I just decided. That's what it is today. Brittany said I needed to be here tonight, and we love how that happens here on the network. I really, it even blows my mind that sometimes we'll have conversations on this show. I remember when you did the show, season 4 on the Breakthrough Show. And I remember, gosh, it was probably like 4 months later or so that someone had seen your episode and was like, I really needed that today. And it's always just when people need something, it just shows up. And I love the way that happens. I love the way that happens.
That's amazing. It's good to know that we're helping people, like the reinforcement. Sometimes when you do this type of work, you're kind of accustomed to being in the drudges or the dark, the majority of the time. And so it's nice to hear the feedback of like, yeah, this is helping.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you find that being an entrepreneur, I mean, I know you have your clients and I'm sure you get great feedback, sometimes after the fact from them, but as you're going through the process with your clients, do you ever feel that sense of like, am I really helping? Like, do you ever struggle with maybe that loneliness or that like, because when you're working for yourself, you don't have someone giving you like employee of the month.
Oh my gosh. Don't you feel that way?
All the time.
I mean, I think, yeah, for us as entrepreneurs, I think that's why we're so, I think, okay, twofold here. I think that we do the business coaching and programs and things like that for the purpose of like learning new information and to scale or to understand more about how to, make a better business. But I also think that it has a lot to do with the fact that like we lack community, right? Like, had I gone the more traditional route and not done the like holistic and just decided to take a full left, which, still I can't even take credit for it because I really just feel like God's just really awesome in that regard. It was just like, no, go this way. And I was like, okay, I don't know what we're doing here, because you have to recall that when I started this process, there was not really anything called like coaching. There was no industry. Right. So I had a lot of the traditionalism coming and going, you can't do that. Like, you can't do that. You have to do it this way. You have to do it this. And I'm like, why can't I help people? Like, it's on me. So remind me of your question though, because I've talked myself into a rabbit hole.
No idea. I'm so into what you're talking about. No, we were talking about like
being alone. Yeah, that's what we were talking about. Absolutely. Absolutely you do. And it's really, I think, maybe we should start a like support group for like entrepreneurs.
And see,
that's not just like a business coaching thing, but like just where we can all kind of go like, you're doing a good job. You're doing it. We can Oprah each other a little,
Right. And see, I've always wanted something like that because I was invited even just last week to a community, but it's around like coaching, and that's not particularly what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that, hey, you did a freaking great job with your client.
Just the encouragement,
we could have a community member of the month instead of employee of the month or something like where you're being recognized for what you're doing. And
this is a great idea.
See?
Okay. I think we just started a new business. Look at that. You guys watch that happen in its origin story. This is Genesis.
This is what's happening. I wanted to get in, Haley, to some of the specific work that you do, because I know a lot of people, they may have heard of hypnotherapy. Some people are like, I don't know what Psych K is. Tell us a little bit about some of these different components and Who do you think you are to put them all together?
I don't know. I think I was raised by a hippie who said I can do whatever I want whenever I want, and that nobody can stop me just as long as I follow my dream.
Who gets
So back in the day, that was like, Mom, I need more structure. This doesn't make any sense, But now I'm like living every, breath that she spoke into me, because I still am not done. Just so everybody knows, like, I don't know if I want to be a doctor when I grow up. Who knows, So I'm still in that headspace. So I guess my foundations were, so I went to school for psychology at ASU. I was able to graduate with highest honors there. And then in the process of moving towards clinicianhood, I stumbled upon this thing called Psych K, and it actually changed my life. It changed a foundational trauma from childhood that allowed me to see the world in a completely different perspective. And I actually sat on it for a couple of years because it was so advanced, and it was also a little outside of my traditional religion. And so I prayed about it a lot, and I asked God whether or not it was safe for me to move into that space. And once I got permission on that, I started working. I just started a business. While I was still in school, I just started a business, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do this. Like, it was so powerful for me. I had gone to traditional counseling, Christian counseling. I had prayed, but my life, I'm smart enough to understand that my behaviors were very specific to this trauma. So it was still expressing itself while it was solved according to what I had done, for a therapy purpose. It was still seeing these behaviors that were outside of the realm or that were inside of a trauma response. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. So I did. So I started it. I started that while I was in school, and that was kind of how Stitched Head and Hearts was its origin stories. And then it just kind of like manifested from there. Like I said, I get bored. So then it was like, well, let's do hypnotherapy. So I went and I did my certification and all my schoolwork for that. And then I was like, well, let's see. I've been working a lot with, helping people with their spiritual life and that type of coaching. Let's go get a ministry, So then I did that. So it's just, one thing after the other after the other. Just because it's just adding another tool, and I'm really on, like I said, on the ride just as much as anybody is who's watching me, because I don't know where I'm going. And I just lean into, what do you want me to do today? How can I help your people? What can I do to be of service today? And so it changes all the time. So that's kind of like where I started, and where I am today. I still just do everything. If somebody comes to me for any of the above, I'm happy to work with them. Like I said, you are everywhere you go. So oftentimes it's everywhere. So I really just try to help them with each of those, those pinnacle infrastructures, work, family, this, that, the other. I try to help people with those. And yeah, I think that's where I am right now. The hypnotherapy that I do at this point has really kind of like, that will be one thing that I have probably niched, and narrowed. I work very specifically with people who have experienced trauma. And then I try to allow us to go back in to that trauma in a safe way, to be able to create almost like an emotional sedative. It's not that we don't remember what happened, but we in fact don't feel the emotional pain around it.
Right.
So that's been something that, again, I did not come up with. It was really one of those things where I just follow, the next, step that's, risen at your foot, really, and I'm just following that path. So I do that with the hypnotherapy. Psych K is a really hard thing to explain. I think you know that. Like, the K component is around kinesiology, so it's testing to determine their theory is to determine what we believe to be true and what we don't on a subconscious level, and then I work on that subconscious bias, and we try to reframe into a space where we have something that's a little bit less limiting.
Right.
And obviously the hypnosis is going to do that too. And the fundamentals of what I do in counseling and coaching, with the two processes I mentioned, the internal monologue and the morning practice, those two things feed into those modalities. So whatever somebody wants to do,
Right.
it all kind of flows together nicely. And then even if I'm working with couples, we have to take care of ourselves. I don't just focus on a couple. We do individual and couples. So yeah, because you can't not fix this and expect this to work. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I love that you work with them individually as well. And I have a question regarding trauma and psyche and both hypnosis. I know a lot of times we use those as like dealing with trauma after the fact. So something as a child, something that happened years ago. If someone's going through like a traumatic experience right now, are those still effective tools to use in the moment when the trauma is happening, or are there different things that you do like as the trauma's going on?
That's a really good question. Because I think that has become a really big buzzword in this climate in the last 3 years. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely believe that is what people are experiencing and why we are so susceptible to polarization and finding our own camps, because a lot of what's happening right now, we're acting from that amygdalic hijacking of fear. So when that happens, we're unable to use the prefrontal cortex, and that is our delegation and management system. And the amygdala usurps that. So that's the nature of what we're experiencing. So it's prime for trauma. There's a few different theories around trauma, that it doesn't truly manifest in the way that it's going to manifest for 6 to 9 months. Was one study that I read. I have seen it individualized. I have seen some people be ready to cope with it, right now. There used to be old theories around big trauma, so big T versus little t, and those types of things where I think it also has to do with the person and how they're made up. Pain is relative to your DNA, to your genomes, to your hypersensitivity and how they express themselves. So I could stub my toe and think nothing of it. You could stub your toe and it could be this catastrophic experience. And so is someone willing to deal with that out the forefront, and they want to use the modality of, hypnotherapy or psyche or, talk? I'm open to whatever. In many ways, again, I'm a service to my clientele. All I can do is go, here's what I have. What do you want to do? What feels safest to you? Because some people are really open to it, and some people are like, yeah, absolutely not.
Yeah, that's really interesting and I never thought about that, about even just our readiness to process trauma. Like if you and I were in a car accident together, you might be ready to like, okay, this is freaking me out. Like, let's deal with it right now. Whereas it might not affect me for some time or something like that. So I never thought about that with the timing of trauma as well. So that's really a great point.
Well, from a neurological perspective, our brain does a bit of disassociation. So with trauma, so I recently started actually doing with my therapist some EMDR, which is specific to trauma. It's one of the best modalities that clinicians offer. And I'm finding that it's very similar to the hypnosis, which I think is interesting because that was not planned. But regardless, the theory is that when trauma happens, the brain scatters the senses. So your taste, touch, feel, think, they all go in different directions. And so that's why you'll find somebody who will, hear country music and all of a sudden they are, freaking out. And it's like, well, that's what, I heard when I was in this car accident. Right. So, and so we don't realize that, but we're supposed to bring all of those pieces back together in a safe environment with distance. So back in the day, hypnotherapy, just as a side note, used to be a full regression. And that's what you would see on TV where somebody like totally starts freaking out.
Yeah.
I don't do that. Like we go back to that moment. It's a pseudo regression. They're safe distance. You and I are sitting there together watching you at that time, and we go in and fix it. EMDR is very similar. And so if you're ready to deal with it, I'm not going to tell you one way or the other. If you're open to it and we can try it and it gets out of hand, like in the sense that you feel too overwhelmed, it's easy to pull somebody out of hypnosis. As far as Psych K is concerned, they have a built-in readiness, which is really cool.
Okay.
There's a safeguard. So you may say, oh, Haley, I want to deal with this trauma. It's really getting in the way of things. And I will go to work that new belief with you. And I'll ask your system whether or not it's safe for us to be able to do that. And your system will tell me yes or no. So I don't even really have to, you know best what you need.
Yeah. That's so convenient. That is just
I know, right? The alleviation for me is nice too, because I'm like, look, I can't go by. No, there's no bypassing this, so we don't get past this thing. So we can try again later.
Yeah. I think that that's really nice to have that testing that happens with Psych K, because I think a lot of times, whether we're talking about personal development or even decisions that we have to make in our business, our ego gets in the way and we have no idea.
Yes, absolutely. It's so funny too, because you're right about that. There's lots of things where, I think in many ways my education has trained me to stay out of the way of like confirmation bias and, that I'm right, or I found the magic, thing. You're supposed to constantly test up against those types of things, but it's the ego is ego, right? We all have it. It is what keeps us alive, we all have some level of narcissism that is very Darwinian and allows us to stay alive. So, and fight for what we believe in. So it's a good thing in the right doses. And so that being said, we can definitely get in our own way in that regard. And Psych K is something I use every day, in the sense that I'm always asking myself that question: is this is this something that is the greatest option for me right now? And I can ask myself that question. So it's something that's super duper useful.
Yeah. And you just said a buzzword that makes me want to have you come back and have a whole conversation on a different show about the narcissism word, because we are literally hearing that everywhere right now. Everywhere. And I think that I say this not being in the field and not really knowing what I'm talking about, but I really feel like it's being overused. I feel like it's being overused, and I feel like there's a lot of like hearing the symptoms and going, it must be this, without necessarily having the facts to back it up.
Well, and let's be clear, clinicians are clinicians, and they're trained the way that they are for a reason, and they have a lot more education, and they are above the normal humans, being able to Google's pay grade. So they have a very, very difficult job, and you find them not making those assessments or providing those diagnoses for 9 months to a year. They spend a lot of time with their clients to determine whether or not that's actually something that's happening. They have a lot of different, testing that allows to provide them that type of information. And it's never something that's taken lightly. But to your point, I always say that a pendulum is going to swing, right? So you're pulling it in this direction. We had, and from a history perspective, Jessica, we had a lot of people that were very ashamed of mental health and ashamed of therapy and ashamed of having to go see somebody. Right. And it was a very hush-hush type of deal. So obviously, it's going to swing in the other direction. And I feel like it's disproportionate in the other direction. You hear all of these true diagnoses, right? These are things that they're no joke. You don't flippantly throw NPD around. Right. You don't flippantly throw BPD around. You don't flippantly throw anxiety, depression, ADHD, because just because you have some symptoms that are close, or you went on TikTok and your friend said A, B, and C, like we need to take this back into and put it towards the professionals. I mean, I even won't even put myself in that space. Obviously, I don't diagnose. I can't.
Right.
But
Right.
I can provide information towards. My education is there. So from a teacher perspective, I can go, hey, look, this is what they're doing. This is what's needed for this. And if you're really, uncertain about that thing, then let me refer you out. But I do think as a society, we have leaned so far into, oh, it's a mental health condition. And then what happens that precipitates that is, I need these extra leniencies. And we start seeing that card played. And it's become where the consumer is telling the professional what they need for medication, what they need for therapy, because they've done their research. So it's an interesting time in history, I think, for mental healthcare professionals. I think also for the medical field. Those words, narcissism, they are thrown around a lot. It's a very small percentage of humanity that actually has NPD.
Right.
And a very small that has any type of antisocial personality disorders, or we're within that specific. I think that narcissistic personality disorder is cluster B. There's A, B, and C, and I think I think it's B. So before they're going to diagnose any of that stuff, that's going to be something that is thoroughly looked at. So, and narcissism, I think, is something that people don't realize is, like I said, something we actually need to survive. So we need something that wills us in that direction. It's the reason we look at our kids and we go, oh my God, they're so perfect. I'm going to make sure that nothing happens to you because that baby looks like you. So that's narcissism.
See, we need to have, we need to have a whole I think, will you do like a special with me? Can we just do like a special? Because I think that it's so needed right now, because like you said, when you're talking about these different disorders, whether it's narcissism or something else, it is really a small percentage that has that textbook, diagnosis. And I think sometimes what's happening with people is there's a fear, well, if they're not diagnosed with this, then what I experienced maybe isn't as valid. Maybe maybe it's not as real as or thinking that it's less than, it's that they're somehow feeling dishonored by, if it doesn't have this heavy narcissistic diagnosis or whatever diagnosis we're talking about, that somehow it isn't valid. And I don't think that's the case, but I think that that's what people might be feeling a little bit.
Well, I think that we have to understand as human beings, when we are reconciled, specifically in relationship with an ideology that is in contrast to what we believe of this person. So I believe Jessica's an amazing person. She's loving, she's giving, she's always going to make sure that she's there for me. And then you slight me in some way, right? You do something that I feel is not okay. And I bring it to you in a loving way. And I say, hey, look, this is not okay. I don't appreciate this. And you double down. Okay. So people will go, oh, they're a narcissist because they won't admit they're wrong. They're a narcissist because they've hurt me in this way and they won't stop doing this thing. Now, look, this is hyperbolic and it's, just an example. But that double down effect is normal. You are made with this internal structure that has a self-preservation bias. That you do have confirmation bias that plays in. So confirmation bias is basically backfilling, coming up with a conclusion and then backfilling information to prove your point. Self-preservation is what it sounds like. I have to make sure that I'm okay. Well, in relationship, when you change who you are, not only do I have to defend who I am, but I also have to reconcile with the fact that you're not who you say you are. And that is the scary thing for people, because you know why? I'm going to flip this really quick on you. It's narcissism. We are frustrated with ourselves that we were duped. So I have to be a victim because otherwise, and I was duped because Jessica said she was who she said she was. And now she's not. So does that mean that I have to look at my own self-identity and I have to go, oh my gosh, I can be duped. I can be persuaded. Somebody could get the better of me. So then I have to ask myself, what's wrong with my picker? What's wrong with my ability to perceive or discern? Or so it's all about the echo chamber. It's you that you're talking about. So I find it really interesting seeing that word specifically become such a buzzword and be out there so much. Your experience in a relationship where you've been wrong is valid because it was your experience.
Right.
I don't need somebody else to tell me that or I don't need them to have a diagnosis. I just need to know that hurt me and that I'm not going to tolerate it anymore and that I get to move on from that. But I don't have to pin them with a diagnosis. And there's two ways of really dealing with that. I see some people cope in the framework of they're the victim, and I see some people cope in the way that they're the victor. And so they'll go, it didn't affect me, I don't care. So then you're avoidant, you're not dealing with it, or it's overindulgent where you become the victim. It's like, no, we're all human beings, and we've all gone through this life experience and been programmed in some ways from our childhood. And maybe we had a narcissistic parent or grandparent. And so we picked up some of those manipulative tactics and we didn't even realize they were unhealthy. Does that make us a narcissist? No. So, yeah.
Pass the collection plate, boys and girls. This has been Church with Miss Hallock. Listen, Brittany was like, I love Haley. She must come back. It needs to happen. I love it because there's so many things right now that I think mental health if you could have one wish for the mental health community, what would that be, Haley?
I don't even really know. I guess maybe, in the vein of what we're talking about, like maybe just a little bit more allowing humans to be human beings without like trying to label them. Less labels and more humanity. Like, let's kind of just like maybe just go, man, we're all, I don't know. I guess it brings it back to the balance philosophy I have, but it also brings it back to the customization. Like when we do, Myers-Briggs tests and things like that, it's like I could come out to be an ENFP and so could you, but the percentages are different. So it makes us different. In addition to that, there's other things that are different about us. Yeah. And so we can't necessarily just slap a label on it and call it a day. And I would also like to see where it was reversed a little in the sense that the professional is the professional and the client or patient is not the consumer coming in demanding some type of service.
Right.
Like the power dynamic change back to what it needs to be.
Yeah. I think there's a difference between being informed about your body and your experience and then and understanding that your doctor does work for you. However, they do have education.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Yeah. Just because you looked it up on YouTube University doesn't mean that you know the answer to the question. It takes years of, so you could bring it up, right? So I think this thing is, and I have clients do that all the time. I think this is what's happening with me. I think this is what's happening with me. It's my job as a practitioner to come in and go like, all right, let's uncover that. Because if that's true, then these things would also have to be true, right? And so, when you have an education in that field, it's gonna change your filter.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. So many good things. This is going to be another one. I'm going to have difficulty going to take out 1-minute clips for the TikTok. Okay. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard.
I follow you on TikTok. I'm going to have to go. I'm going to have to go. And
yes. The TikTok is where it's at. Okay.
Nice.
It's a wonderful narcissistic place to be.
It's such a beautiful feedback loop. I'm just seeing all the successes I have. Hey, you know what? Sometimes we need that. It keeps us built up. Like you said, being an entrepreneur, you're on the boat alone a lot of the time. So you got to kind of be your own.
I cannot, when entrepreneurs tell me that they don't care at all what other people think, I think that is the biggest load of horseshit I have ever heard in my entire life. You mean to tell me as a human being, you don't enjoy someone giving you a pat on the back? Give me a break.
Yeah, I think we already know that from a neuroscience perspective to be a lie. And it's the reason that we're addicted to social media, because
Mm,
for every like and for everything you like, you're getting a dopamine hit. So
mm.
you're getting high. I mean, I hate to break it to you, but science says otherwise. You care. And
Well,
actually, we're biologically predisposed to gain the acceptance of our family first, and then we grow up a little bit, then it's our peer group. So that's actually behavioral psychology. So again, probably not right there.
that was cute, but I love it, Haley. Well, the last thing I like to ask everybody when they come on the show is if we have an entrepreneur or someone who's thinking about being an entrepreneur watching the show, and they're like, well, I want to do things my way. I have these ideas, but everybody's telling me that's wrong and that's not what I should be doing. What do you tell that person to sort of come down and do what they want to do anyway?
Come see me. I'll help you. Number one. Number two, you know what you're here for. You're going to need help, maybe from a technological perspective, or maybe from a how do I market perspective. And then, yeah, you ask an expert here and there. But for the most part, that was what was birthed from you. And so it's yours. And so much like pregnancy, there's a gestation period. And during that time, you really got to get quiet and you got to figure out what you want it to look like, who you want to help, and do that. And then maybe ask a few people here and there to help you with the things that you're less than proficient in.
Hmm. I love that. I mean, I think it goes back to something you were saying before about, how we can do when we all come together, things are a little bit easier. And I think it's great to lean in on your strengths and the things that you're good at, but also like there's a world of people who know things out there and can make things a little bit easier for you, right?
Absolutely. No, and there's things I think that being an entrepreneur, we're wearing many hats or spinning lots of plates, and to scale, you can't continue to spin all those plates. You have to delegate and throw something off to other people.
Yeah.
And there's also things that I find when you're doing that soul or purpose driven type of entrepreneurship that you you're going to be good at what you're called to do. You're not necessarily going to be a good accountant, a good scheduling person, a good, IT tech. Like you're not going to be those things. You're going to be good at what you do. So when you do start to scale, the delegation process is kind of like number one. I think for me, that was a really hard lesson to learn. Perfectionism. I was kind of like, no, I'll do it. No, I'll do it. And it's my baby. No, I'll do it. And, now I'm like, figure this out, to my assistant.
How many times is Jessica going to be called out in one show? I don't know.
Sorry.
No, I think it's something like
I love you.
I know. And I love you so much because you do have that ability to just call people where they are, but in a loving and safe space. And I appreciate that about you. You guys, for those of you that are looking at the screen, you can connect with Haley, haleyhallock.com if you're just seeing what's on the screen. But I also put down in the description of the show and also in the comments, the clickable link where you guys can visit Haley at psychologytoday.com. What can they find there, Haley?
So the website is just going to be the website. It's going to probably just tell you informationally so if you wanted more information on what Psych K is, hypnosis is, who is a part of the office staff, and those types of things, and you can kind of go to that. My website isn't my favorite thing in the world. The Psychology Today is better. It's going to give you just a quick synopsis of what I do, what I've done, and what I'm providing. And it also has like just a clickable link to my email and to the business phone and to all of that. So that one's a little bit like, it's a little easier, I guess.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we have the links there for you guys. You can definitely check those out. Haley, you would never know that you haven't done this in so long. I will tell you.
Well, you make it very, very easy, darling. It's very easy to talk to you.
Thank you so much. Brittany, love this. I've seen a lot of people coming and going here tonight. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Thank you.
appreciate you so much. And don't forget, you can leave comments on the replay as well. And I'm happy to get back to you and pass on any questions you might have to Haley. Also, I want to remind you, we'll be back in a couple of weeks for another fantastic guest. Let's see who we will not be on July 4th because some of us need a day off. That's what we're going to do. But we have Manny Wolf joining us on the 18th. So be sure to join us for that show as well. Haley, thank you again for being here tonight. I invite you to hang out for a few minutes after the show. And for the rest of you, I'm your host, Jessica Dugas, and I want to encourage you every day to do things your way. And we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.